Going to Adam Woods and Tullamore Farm, exactly.
Perfect. We're just going to put this out to Vimeo now, so I will put everyone on mute.
Hi folks, I'm Jack Kennedy and you're very welcome to this evening seminar, the second webinar in a series of 6 webinars taking place over the next 7 weeks on farmersjournal.ie. Shout out to our sponsors, Chanel Animal Health and AXA Insurance. We want you to participate in tonight's show, so you can email your questions to webinar@farmersjournal.ie or WhatsApp 086 836 6465. Let me quickly introduce you to my panel of specialists. We have Aidan Brennan, Dairy Editor with the Journal, Siobhan Walsh, Farm Sustainability Specialist, Adam Woods, Suckler and Beef Editor, all from the Farmers Journal, and indeed Mark Plunkett from Teagasc. Delighted, lads, to have you all on the show. Tonight, we're going to show a series of short videos. We're going to come back into studio, have a chat about each of the videos and take your questions and try and answer them as best we can as we go through the night. Hopefully, we'll be in and out within the hour. First up, we go to a short video of Adam Woods on Tullamore Farm, and he's talking to us about what's happening, the Slurry on Tullamore Farm. Let's have a look.
Okay, we're here on Tullamore Farm. It's Monday the 7th of February 2022. Slurry season 2022 has just started behind me. Our local contractor Tom Lawler has been in all morning starting our slurry spreading, and that's a little bit later than normal this year in that we want to get the maximum kick out of this slurry in 2022 given fertilizer prices where they are. I'd like to put that into context. We're spending between 18 and 20,000 on fertilizer here on Tullamore Farm every year. That's going to be up at 35-40,000 in 2022, so it's a massive lift in costs, and that turns us to our slurry. Not that we've always tried to get the maximum out of our slurry, but in 2022 that's really important. We're spreading it by a low emission slurry spreading. That means we're going to get the maximum nitrogen out of that slurry. Robert is spreading it at 2,500 gallons to the acre, so that means we're sort of around that 22-23 units of nitrogen to the acre in terms of the kick that we're going to get out of this. You're talking in 1,000 gallons of slurry, it's 9 units of nitrogen, 5 units of phosphorus and 32 units of potassium. We're I guess, heading this slurry to paddocks that are going to be grazed, I guess, in the next sort of 4 or 6 weeks. We've sort of split the farm up into 3 different parts. We've got the areas that are grazed out really tight, and we're not going with slurry on them. They tend to be our silage fields, and we'll go on slurry with them, we'll say, a little bit later on in the next month. We've then got our medium covers, which is just behind me. That's getting that trail and shoe slurry that's going to be grazed. And then we've got our heavy covers, and those heavy covers are going to be grazed first, and then they'll get either fertilizer or slurry after that. I guess in terms of value here, you're talking €50 per 1,000 gallons this year. So it really has to be treated as a fertilizer on your farm, as an asset on your farm, and we need to get the maximum out of it. I guess if you're looking at soil samples back home on your farm, you're talking index 4 soils. If you have any index 4 soils, don't go with slurry to those. You're talking index 3 soils or less in terms of the grazing soils that we're spreading slurry on here. And really, I know we're spreading today on grazing ground, but really we want to aim that slurry to our silage fertilizer or our silage fields, which we'll be spreading in March here on the farm, because slurry can contribute all the P and all the K that is needed for that silage crop in 2022. So if we're spreading 3,000 gallons of slurry to the acre for a silage crop, that's 15 units of P, and it's up on 90 units of K, and it's somewhere around 27, 30 units of nitrogen. So really what we're going to do on Tullamore Farm here is just top that up with a little bit of artificial nitrogen, maybe up to a sort of a bag of urea, maybe a bag and a half of urea, to try and top that nitrogen up so we get the full complement of fertilizer for our silage crop. So it's a dull, dark, damp day here in Tullamore. That's important because we'll get the maximum nitrogen efficiency out of that slurry again on a dull, dark day. If we were spreading this slurry during the summertime on a dry, sunny day, we'd reduce our nitrogen efficiency by half. So we'd only be getting about 5 units out of that 1,000 gallons if we were spreading this slurry in the summertime. So really, really important that, look at it, back home, slurry is looked upon as a fertilizer and you get maximum efficiency out of it in 2022.
Okay, folks, just coming back in there now. Adam, ground conditions were touch and go.
Yeah, Jack, and that was, I guess, Monday week. In terms of we hadn't a lot of rain in Tullamore that week. We've had an awful lot of rain in the last couple of days down there. Today was unbelievably wet down there. Huge amount of rain across the country, and I suppose that has really stopped slurry spreading, especially in the west. As regards ground conditions, are really, really difficult now. And look, it's going to put a real halt on slurry for another week or 10 days. And I suppose that's the key as regards maybe a weather window in the springtime of getting out. And look, we tried our best there, but yeah, you're right. It was just touch and go on some of those paddocks. Yeah.
Adam, you were very specific in terms of the content of the slurry, the nutrient content of the slurry. You called out 9, 5, 32. I wrote it down here. You must have had it tested, did you?
Yeah, no, we hadn't it tested, Jack. I suppose that's working off about a 6% dry matter, I think. And look at Mark or Siobhan, maybe he'll correct me on that. But we did test, Siobhan, as part of her project, tested the slurry that day, but we haven't got the results back yet. So I suppose it needs to be mixed. I suppose you might say, well, why didn't you test it before we spread it? But that would maybe involve, I suppose, mixing it and then leaving it in terms of, but we'll have it for again. Look, we've still a lot of slurry on Tullamore Farm in terms of getting out on silage ground and stuff, and it'll be really good and really useful to have those results back in. I know Siobhan will talk later on, I guess about other farms' results that she has in.
But Siobhan, it's fair to say retrospectively you can look back once you get the results in and kind of say what exactly it got, so that you can kind of balance up with your artificial fertilizer. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
Yeah, and sure. Look, you should have a fair idea. Like under the bulls, you should have a high P and target that at your low P soils. And if animals that are getting a lot of silage should have higher K, and then top up after, like you said. But and as well, if you test if you test 1 or 2 years, you'll have an idea what's in your slurry, maybe, and you won't test the following year. So, look, the samples take about 10 days, so we'll probably have them tomorrow or the next day. We didn't have them on time for the webinar.
That's okay. Adam, have you a lot of slurry left on Tullamore for the silage ground? You talked in the video there that maybe you'll come out in early March for the silage ground application of slurry. Have you plenty of slurry, or what's the?
Yeah, there is, Jack. Look, everything is still housed down there, and will be housed for another little while now, I suppose. So we just sort of got out, took a bit of pressure off tanks in terms of tanks getting full. We were coming full down there. So just to get out and get it onto those paddocks, maybe some of the paddocks that are a little bit lower in P and K, but the big I suppose slurry application will go to our silage ground. We're going to target that slurry for our silage ground because that's our biggest requirement for fertilizer, and we see it in Tullamore, I guess, as the biggest area that we can maybe reduce our fertilizer complement on our silage ground in terms of going with the slurry on it.
And again, you talked about a bag and a half of urea to top up the nitrogen for the silage, I suppose. Protected urea, Adam, is it?
Yeah, we'll go with it 100 units, Jack, probably of nitrogen on that first cut silage ground. And we'll say we're talking there in the video, but that slurry delivering maybe somewhere around 30 units. So we're going to need a bag and a half of urea after that in terms of topping up. Now some farmers, I know we're speaking to farmers in the last week or two about maybe issues with urea on silage ground, and maybe Mark can come up with that, maybe an answer for that later on. But some people tend we haven't got bad results on Tullamore farmers regards spreading urea, but I see talking to some farmers, they tend to see maybe a poor response to urea on silage ground. I'm not too sure why, or maybe it's just to think that.
Mark, do you want to touch off that in terms of the urea on the silage ground now?
Well, I suppose maybe it's down to conditions or maybe time of application. And look, if you go for the protected urea, it is that bit safer, Jack. Like, you know what I mean, from an emissions point of view. So that would be a help to I suppose safeguard against losses.
Mark, there's another one in for you very quickly. John from Longford, can I spread lime on silage ground now? It will be getting slurry in April. Can I spread lime on silage ground now? It will be getting slurry in April.
At this stage now, I'd be inclined to hold off on the lime and go with the lime after the first cut. There is a risk that you'll bring lime in on the grass at this stage into the pit. So I'd hold off till after the first cut, Jack.
Okay, even though we're still a good bit away from it, Mark, and plenty of rain, but you're saying to hold off. Here we are now, the middle of February. You're saying the draw a line on it now. I mean, that's an issue with slurry as well. Adam, you were talking about getting out there in Paddy's Day for getting out before Paddy's Day with slurry. But you've no fear of that, like we'll say on silage ground, kind of you'll get it out and there won't be any contamination.
I don't think so, Jack. We'll try and aim for, I suppose, dull, damp days again, and not that it's not getting dried maybe very, very quickly in terms of in the rows, maybe behind that trailing shoe. And look, we'll try and work with as watery slurry as we can as well, maybe in terms of just that it doesn't be sit in those lines. And yeah, you're right. On some farms, maybe where it dries very quickly, that you can actually see those lines maybe coming up on the silage crop, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that slurry sort of gets incorporated into the soil after it's spread.
Okay, remember folks, WhatsApp your questions 086-836-6465 or email webinar@farmersjournal.ie. We'll move quickly into our second short video where we're talking slurry lime testing with Siobhan and Adam. Let's have a look.
Okay, Siobhan, we're here on Tullamore Farm. Let's talk about soil fertility. We're in a pretty good place here on Tullamore Farm in relation to soil fertility. How are we looking?
We are, Adam, yeah. We hear so much advice on lime at the minute, but we have high pH here, so we don't need to apply lime, so we're in a very good position that way. I suppose if we didn't have high lime, we would be applying lime to ground, and hopefully it would help to bring up our indexes in this high price year. Fairly good on P's and K's across the farm as well, maybe a little bit of work to do, but overall in a very good position for the year that's in it.
Given where fertiliser prices are this year, in terms of if you're down at index 1 and 2, what's the advice there for farmers this year? Do you still need to try and correct that, or do you correct it with slurry, or fertiliser is very, very expensive to go about correcting that this year?
I don't think I'd be, like you said, I don't think I'd be going correcting it this year, but lime is a really cheap input. 22, 26 euro will get it spread and everything on your farm, and if that lime is applied, then it can help bring up, you might come up a full index with an increase in pH, so that's a really good step to take. And then targeting your slurry. So Sean is targeting his slurry here to the lower P and K ground, and we're testing the slurry here on Tullamore Farm. So now the slurry samples have to be agitated, so we won't have the samples back until they're spreading here today, so we'll have them back in 10 days or so, but we'll know what went out on that ground. But I suppose we have an idea, the animals who are getting more silage, maybe that will be higher in K, the bulls, the slurry under them will be higher in P, so we can target that slurry to the lower P's and K's.
Is that something, we'll say, every farmer should be doing this year in terms of getting their slurry tested, and how much does that cost? Yeah,
I think so. Slurry sampling, 60 to 80 euro will get your slurry tested. Ideally, you'd be testing a few tanks, so test under the cows, under the bulls, under the different diets, I suppose, is what you do. And, if you test 2 years in a row and your diet's not changing much on farm, you have a fair idea then what's in those samples. So you don't have to test your slurry every year, but certainly this year it's good to know. Again, you'll only have the results after the slurry has come out, so get those results and then adjust your rates accordingly then for your P's and K's.
I guess the other one is soil sample in terms of out there on farms and dry
Yeah.
stock farms. I know we're getting a little bit late now in terms of slurry going out, but there is still some time over the west, especially in terms of getting soil samples
Yeah,
in.
like if fertilizer or slurry hasn't gone out, there's still plenty of time to soil sample, and it's, you know, it's going to bring you back a return. And you know, because some people might be surprised, and of course if you don't soil sample, you're going to index 3 on your records as well for your farm. So it's really important. I mean, I don't think we can emphasize soil sampling enough on farms.
In terms of other ways of sort of reducing that pain of high fertilizer costs in 2022, you're taking a look at multi-species swards here. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing here.
Yeah, I suppose, look, multi-species swards, there's a huge potential to lower nitrogen. There's a lot of research needed on these swards still, but there is potential there to reduce nitrogen rates dramatically. You know, a bag of urea in the spring and that could be it for the year. So we're going to try them on Tullamore farm this year. I suppose the first thing to note is Sean is good at managing clover on this farm, and you know, if in this paddock that we're in at the minute, there's good clover in it. So I suppose if you're not good at managing clover, you're not going to be probably good at managing multi-species swards. So Sean is taking the next step now. We're still kind of deciding what area to plant, but probably a max of 10 acres. Like, we're not going to go mad and plant the whole farm, and take our time going into them and see do they work. And I suppose one reason why, apart from the nitrogen saving and the year that's in it, Tullamore farm, especially where we are now in Cluna, is very dry. So maybe those multi-species swards will help to get a taproot down and help to combat, you know, if we get a year like 2018, or even last year for a period of the summer there was drought, you know, it might help, those swards might help. But I think as well, over the year, if nitrogen is being cut back, we'll see the clover improve in the swards all over the farm, and I think that's something people should note. I mean, clover has a job to do. It's meant to fix nitrogen. If you're applying high rates of nitrogen, it doesn't have a job to do and it's going to die out. So this year, when people are reducing their nitrogen rates, take a look at your clover and you might find that it's coming back and you can save nitrogen further.
Finally, is there an area of the farm that farmers should be targeting in terms of those? You've almost answered there in terms of a dry area of the farm, but is there a specific area of the farm or a specific paddock that you should target? Does soil fertility need to be high? And what sort of species are you looking at putting in here on Tullamore farm?
Yeah, so you need to have a good pH. So you're looking at 6.5. So, you know, and that's for that's clover as well. And sure, look, 40% of the multi-species is going to be clover. So you need that high pH. Don't bother going in sowing them if the pH isn't right, and if you're not going to adjust it, because it'll find it very hard to succeed. In terms of what's going to go into it, I think we'll go basic. You know, we don't have to be trying to impress anyone, just try and get it to grow right. So clover, probably a bit of plantain, and we'll see what mixes are out there. We'll have a look around, but I think red and white clover definitely, a mix of grasses, and then the plantain as well, which will have a good root down.
Good job, folks. Mark, coming to you first. Siobhan was very clear there. She wouldn't go correcting a soil fertility problem this year. Like, would you agree with her?
I would absolutely in the current year, like P's and K's have doubled. So look, I would be very much on the strategy just in terms of applying a maintenance application to the grazing ground, and the same in the silage ground. I would just feed the crop in the current year. And absolutely PHs, if PHs haven't been fixed, if there's parts of the farm that haven't seen lime in a number of years, like now is the time, like, you know.
But I'll argue now, like, I mean, would it still be, you know, this is false economy. Like, I mean, if you don't have your P's and K's, right, you're putting on nitrogen for the rest of the year, like, surely, you know, it's money well spent. You know, I know it's doubled in price, like, you know, but like feed has gone up in price. Like, if depending on the farm situation, like, is it categorical that, listen, you shouldn't fix your P's and K's this year? Look, it's not fixed. You can't fix them in 1 year, but you should keep the program in place. Like, I'll say that's what there's a 5-year program in place on a farm. Should it not be kept in place? Like, it's not a game changer.
Yeah, no, look, it's a fair point, Jack. And I suppose you could look maybe at the farm as a whole and maybe see where Slurry was going. You know, is there parts of the farm there at, you know, strong index 3s, index 4s, and, you know, maybe use the Slurry more wisely in the current year and target it to the index 1s and 2s, and maybe complement then with, you know, bag P's and K's. But look, I suppose it depends on the farm. It depends what the grass demand is, what the grass requirements are. And as you say, you're not going to build it in 1 year. But most definitely, you should be at least applying, off takes, and again, maybe put the slurry to those lower index fields.
Siobhan, I mean, you talked about the slurry testing piece and the fact it's costing 60 or 80 euros, and you said to get a number of tanks. Like, just kind of, and maybe Adam come in as well. Like, I mean, not everyone will know Tullamore Farm to the same extent. Like, there's a shed for the bulls, there's a shed for the suckler cows. Just kind of talk about kind of like they're all on different diets, and hence the slurry is different, and hence that's what you're talking about when you kind of get a,
Yeah, so we don't have the results from Tullamore Slurry. I said that earlier on, but we have some of the results from the footprint farms, and I suppose that'll give us a bit of an idea of, how those things are different. So, there's on one of the footprint farms, there's animals mainly on a silage diet, and the K goes up to as far as 53 units per 1,000 gallons. I thought that was a mistake, like. It's extremely high. We have a farmer with pig slurry, a finishing diet, or it came out of a finishing tank in a pig farm, and there's 13 units of P. Overall, the average results we took 13 slurry samples across the footprint farmers program, and we have an average of 5,527. So huge amount. We have it in the paper this week. How that's going to cover our P's and K's on our indices. So huge savings to be made, and I know the cost is there, but sure, if you want to apply P, you were going to apply the whole place in P and K, Jack. So what, testing your slurry. This is a year where I say I wouldn't go correcting my indices. This is a year for us to learn and to take all the other things on board. And if you're maybe that person down in Ballina who won the lotto, you can go buy your urea potash and your super.
All you tillage farmers, you've plenty to spend at any time of the year. But I mean, Siobhan, what I'm getting at is, like, so the bull house in Tullamore Farm, Adam has bulls in there, and they're getting a ton and a half of concentrate. That's going down into the slurry, giving you more nutrient dense slurry. Isn't that that's the principle of kind of
and most likely higher in P, like. So, and if you think of your probably farmers are looking at lower Ks on their silage ground. Yeah. So where the animals are on a mainly silage diet, put that slurry back out onto the silage ground, which is low in K. I mean, if the majority of the soil samples we have there for the footprint farms, you look at the Ks and you see index 1, index 2 on a group of fields, and you say, that's your silage ground, is it? It's all the silage ground. So we have to put that K back out on the silage ground. We have to replace what's taken off.
I hear you now, but at the same time, so Adam, you've your suckler cows there in another shed. I'd say they're on silage only, right?
Yeah.
And that silage came from low K, low potassium sward. The slurry is going to be low potassium. Am I right there? Am I? Yeah.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. So look, that's why we get our slurry tested as well. So, but I wouldn't be going mad buying potassium to put on it. I'd be correcting the offtake.
I suppose, look, another one to know the value, Jack, as well. Like, I don't know, Siobhan, did you say you had a slurry there that was 55 units of K in it? If you take it, right, like, 1,500 gallons of that slurry will supply enough potash to grow a crop of first cut silage. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's, and even if you take the low dry matter slurries, Jack, like take it at 2%, could be something at a 4,213. That's ideal for the grazing ground. Do you know what I mean? Where your strong slurries, then put them back where the silage or the bales is coming off, like,
Yeah. Aidan, would you agree with all that's going on there?
Sure, I would, I suppose. Yeah, I'd be for feeding the crop in a year like this. And like, rather as just effectively a different way of saying correcting the offtakes. Because it's not a year for capital fertilizer. Like, that's the reality of it. So yeah, I'd agree with what's said, to be honest.
Okay, I'll really test it. Let's say next year now, fertilizer prices stay up. Like, what do we do then? They
probably will, like.
Yeah. So when does your program restart again? So like,
like I think you can potentially, and though maybe Mark doesn't agree, but you can potentially create. It doesn't work for lime. If your pH is off, you have to correct that, and that should be corrected ASAP, regardless of price. But for the likes of P's and K's, if you feed your crop, Jack, you'll get the yield out of it. You won't correct your soil fertility long term, but you get your yield out of it. And like, you can you potentially do that indefinitely. And some farmers are doing that on those low P and K silage fields, or particularly K silage fields. They're spreading 100 units of potash over the course of the year, and they're growing big tonnages of silage.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a distinction between kind of what the crop requirement is. You need to know that, like, because I know some farmers will be listening to this and they'll say, "Oh, shit," but the lad said no P and K this year, 2022.
No.
But that's not the message, Siobhan, you're trying to get across either. Like, in fairness, like, yeah.
But see, the other big point as well, Jack, is what's the offtake? Like, if you take a dry stock system, stock that, say 2 livestock units per hectare, you need about a bag and a quarter of 18-6-12 to maintain that system. But if you have in a dairy situation, or maybe you have 3-4 cows on the grazing block, like you're probably taking off maybe 4 bags of 18-6-12. Do you know what I mean? And you'll run down, like, the more intensive systems, I'd agree with you, Jack, probably can't afford to, to take their finger off the pulse for too long. But the likes of the dry stock systems where there's not the big demand for grass, they're not growing the tons of grass during the year. There is a big distinction in them two systems, but that's an important consideration to keep in the back of your mind as well, especially in the current year.
And you have to do things to improve your soil health as well. I mean, we can't just keep thinking about a bag of fertilizer, and as we go on in the years, like, we're not going to be allowed to depend on a bag. So we need to be looking at clover, improving our soil structure, trying to get organic farmer manure and putting that out. More worms, more soil biology improves your P's and K's and your soil and your organic.
No, I was going to come to that, Siobhan. You're right. Like, I mean, you mentioned this multi-species in the video, and Mark, you're down there in the sunny southeast, and you've been keeping an eye on kind of what's happening in Johnstown Castle in terms of the multi-species side of things. Like, I mean, Siobhan talked about the nitrogen impact of multi-species, like, but is that coming from the clover only, really? When we talk about multi-species, it's coming from the clover rather than the plantain or the other herbs. Am I right there?
Yeah. It's coming from the legumes in the mix, and probably you are pulling more nutrients from deeper places in the soil profile with the deeper rooting crops as well. Like, they're getting, they're getting fantastic results in Johnstown there at the minute, with the multi-species, like, and big opportunity to cut nitrogen rates, like, from the work that's currently being done there.
Okay. Siobhan, you're hoping that Adam won't dry up in Tullamore Farm, so like that the multi-species will save him from the dry summer. Like, I mean,
look, and I'm not saying multi-species are a silver bullet, but I think we have to try them, and I'm not saying everybody has to try them, but I think we're in a position to try them in Tullamore. If they help us out with the drought situation down there, all the better. But we'll see what comes of them. There's a lot more research needed on them, and I wouldn't be advocating them for everybody. And as I said, you have to be good at managing clover, have your pH, your P's and K's right on the ground.
I mean, Aidan, you're always big on that. That listen, there's no point in putting them in and managing them wrongly, or putting them into a poor soil fertility soil. Like,
well, it's the clover. Like, Siobhan hit the nail on the head. It's the clover you need to manage. Mark made an interesting point around the different rooting depths, and maybe people miss that occasionally as well, in the sense that how that could potentially improve water quality. Because if you've leaching going on in soils, which happens, if you've deeper, if it's just grass alone, like, once the nitrogen goes beyond the root of the grass, it's gone. It's potentially open to water, to water courses. Whereas if you have some deeper rooting plants in there, at least they can soak some of that up, and you might actually improve water quality, which is one of the key selling points of it. But I see Glanbia come out now with a new sustainability scheme, and they're encouraging the use of multi-species. Which maybe you could question that, because the research isn't there yet on it. It's ongoing and looks positive, but it's not there yet. So I'd be waiting and see really on multi-species, but very, very pro clover.
Okay, nice one, guys. We might come back to that in the general questions afterwards. I think we should keep the ball rolling. Remember, folks, email your questions to webinar@farmersjournal.ie or WhatsApp 086 836 6465. We're moving on to the dairy side of the house now with a short video from Aidan on fertilizer advice for dairy farmers.
Okay, Aidan, to switch things over maybe to the dairy side of the house in terms of looking at fertiliser applications this spring and maybe what needs to change. We're standing here beside a pallet of urea. It's up on €2,000 almost, this pallet beside us. Does that change things in terms of on dairy farms as regards what's going to happen this spring in terms of fertiliser application?
Sure, I think so, Adam. Yeah, price is one aspect to it, but we're after getting an onslaught over the last 12 months on water quality and climate change and all these other issues that, dairy farmers are in the cold face of. So I think strategies are going to change this year anyway, regardless of the price. But the price is just one of the biggest things that we're looking at the moment.
And how does that, in terms of, I suppose, if your stocking rate is your stocking rate, that you still need to, I suppose, tailor that to your stocking rate, in terms of, regardless of what the price is, or are there other things you can do there to try and pull back that fertilizer application?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing I would say is, ask the question, do you need to spread fertilizer now? And that varies from farm to farm. We've the image in our heads that all dairy farms are highly stocked and, have a lot of cows. But that's not actually the case, and not backed up really by the statistics either. So, like, a lot of farms are lower stocked. They might have loads of grass at the moment as well. So their requirement for grass probably isn't there, particularly if they're, if they traditionally don't get to finish the first rotation, first round of grazing. That means, in other words, that they're ended up cutting some paddocks, closing some of the paddocks for silage, towards like early April on a typical year. So those farms, they probably get away without spreading any nitrogen in February and maybe start in March. But then for the more, I suppose, typical farm that's higher stocked, will have a lot of cows calved by St. Patrick's Day. For me, if they don't spread nitrogen this year, and they normally spread nitrogen, and they normally graze most of their farm in the first rotation, they still need to spread something, or else they're going to have to use an awful lot of expensive feed, whether that's silage, which is poor quality and expensive to replace, or concentrate, which, as we know, is very expensive as well.
Is it simply on dairy farms the same as beef farms? Utilise more of your slurry, correct pH. Is it getting those basic things right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's easy to talk about utilising slurry and correcting your pH. You're not going to correct pH this year. It's if you spread lime now, it's obviously there'll be a bit of a kick in it, but you're not really going to see the effects of that for until a couple of months' time and maybe even a year's time. So that's a long-term strategy. Using slurry again, yeah, it's important and it's essential. I know you've used slurry a lot more this year in Tullamore Farm already. Most dairy farmers are thinking the exact same. The challenge is finding enough ground to put the slurry on. Generally, there's plenty of slurry around, but if you have a high cover, if you have 900 to 1,000 of a cover on a field, you can't really spread slurry in that, even with low emission slurry spreading. You haven't the hope if you're using a splash plate. So yeah, look, I mean, generally those farmers they're probably getting 40 to 50% of their milking platform covered in slurry. In most cases that's been spread now, and then they're going, with the remainder with, the better ground, I'd say, of the remainder. So fields that have good level of perennial ryegrass will respond to nitrogen. Other ones then that are dry and free draining that, will also respond to nitrogen. They're probably putting on half a bag of urea per acre in those situations, or on 23 units per acre.
So with a dairy farmer with this sitting in the yard at the moment, what are you saying to that dairy farmer? Does it depend on stocking rate, or what's the advice for February?
Sure, it does depend on the stocking rate, but generally speaking, I'd be saying, yeah, look, if you're going to utilise that grass, then definitely spread your urea. If you're not going to utilise the grass, so if you have a heavy farm or in a wet area, or it's just not in your nature to go early grazing, then I'd say be more cautious about it. What's the point in applying nitrogen now if you're not going to utilise that grass? Because otherwise it's very expensive. It's dear enough as it is, but it's worse to have the grass that it grows wasted. So I'd say it depends on the situation. If you're a good grazing farmer and you're going to get cows out, then I'd definitely be applying it at low rates and in areas where you're going to get a good response from, and only where you can't use slurry.
Okay, folks, welcome back. I have Aidan, I have a couple of questions coming in for you, but before we get there, we have a 60-second ad for Chanel. We might play that now.
Hi, my name is Stephen Cohn. I'm from Lehin Tollymount, County Mayo. I farm here with my father and my brother. We run a beef and sheep enterprise, 120 ewes and maybe 15 to 20 cows. I really enjoy it out here. It's a nice countryside. Football career, I suppose I play with my club here, Hollymount Carramore. Lucky enough to play with my County Mayo and play with my university as well, UCD. So busy football all year round, but love playing it. So don't see it as a chore, so really enjoy it. In any of them teams that we were successful in, everyone had a high standard. There's a high standard amongst the group, a good culture, and it's no different here at home. My brother and my father will be very ambitious and want to get the most out of what we have. I suppose we were all interested in agriculture, and I suppose we make things easy for ourselves there as much as possible because we're all away from the farm. So as I mentioned before, we breed pedigree Texel rams for the local commercial breeders here. I suppose we'd sell 35 to 40 rams a year, they're very important to us, no more than our Wainlands or our commercial lambs for the factory as well. So, and there's no doubt about it, we do run good grass system, but we give them creep as well. But there's no point giving them creep if they're going to be fighting disease, and we just need to prevent that as much as possible. So I suppose that's why using the likes of Chanel products is ideal for us, in that we can control that, prevent it, and then we're not wasting our food, which our creep and our meal, which is costly. I suppose it's like anything in sport or in competition. If something's going wrong, you just need to be able to adapt and change that. And I suppose on the farm here it's no different. Take for example, if we've too much grass come the summer, we take out paddocks for silage, and it's the same with the health plan. If there's a disease on spread or something like that, we have to just dose and vaccinate and be ready for it. I think we're ahead of the curve in kind of being adaptive and being ahead of the game.
Okay, Aidan, questions. Are you back to us? We are. Aidan, questions. Holding, I was John from Limerick. I was holding off on nitrogen, wanting obviously to spare the bit of bag nitrogen. Now Dudley is roaring outside and fields are saturated. The question is, should I wait now? So he's gone with nothing. I would suggest he's gone with nothing, and he's suggesting, should I wait now until March and go with the full bag instead?
So I suppose my approach to that is that obviously if it's wet, you can't spray it. You know, that's the first thing. So you can't do anything about it now. The weather is broken. It's going to be wet for the weekend. It's going to be wet for, land will be wet for early part of next week. So you're pressing pause for the next week or so anyway, and then assess the conditions. If it's a good week next week, then I'd be happy to go spray it. I'd go with the plan 23 units an acre or whatever it was, half bag of urea, and then go with another half bag or 3/4 of a bag in March. It's a long time, like middle of March application, that's nearly a month away. Like for me, it's a bit too long to wait. You have a lot of lost opportunities to grow feed during that period. Otherwise,
yeah. Is it just me, Aidan? But I see a lot of more guys have gone out around me, gone out with the less slurry spread, and I see some very green fields. Like whether it's just what I'm in the locality, but I feel that places look very green after that kind of first application of slurry. Are you seeing some of that or hearing some of that?
Yeah, definitely, Jack, and people are talking about it as well. Farmers have gone with that early nitrogen or slurry are saying that they got a great response to it. Like, and growth rates are good. The average growth rate is 7 or 8 kilos a day. Predicted growth rates are up to 15 and 16, which is very high for this time of year. Now, the only thing they say about the greening of the slurry, like it should always green a bit because there's P's and K's in there as well, which is something that just ordinary urea doesn't have. So the greening thing, it might be delusional at times, but it's it's a sign that the thing is healthy looking anyway.
But Mark, the science is there, isn't it, to say that Adam talked about it there in the short VT. The science is there that you're going to get, if the weather conditions are right, you're putting it on with the dribble bar, you're going to get more nitrogen taken up by the sward.
Oh, look, absolutely, Jack. You're going to recover more of that nitrogen. You're going to recover 30-40% more of that nitrogen at this time. But I suppose the thing to be conscious, or to be I suppose keep in the back of your mind as well, that the demand is still low out there. Like, Aidan talked about 7-8 kilograms of dry matter. Like, you need about 2 kilograms of nitrogen per week to drive that grass growth. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose that's just something to be conscious. Like, side temperatures are good. Ground conditions have been good, bar the weather we've gotten the last week, but like growth rates are still low. Like, if you look at pasture base there, like we're getting, between 4 or 5, 6 kilograms of dry matter per week. And there's a small nitrogen requirement for that, Jack, to drive that growth, and price soil nitrogen will supply that.
Yeah. Michael from Mayo, for Aidan or Mark. Michael from Mayo, I must be watching young Cohen there. We're hearing nothing else but protected urea, this and that, yet my merchant doesn't have it and says he probably won't get much this year, as he says it's dearer than can or ordinary urea. What's the point if we can't use it? So he's frustrated, Michael from Mayo, in terms of protected urea, can't get it, hearing all about it. Talk to me, who wants to take that?
Yeah. Look. I'll have a go at it, Jack. There seems to be an issue with the supply in the marketplace. Like, I think the urea is tight anyway. But look, if we can get protected urea, there is a big benefit in terms of, from a loss point of view, it is 20% cheaper than can. Do you know what I mean? So in the current year, that's a big saving. Like.
per unit of nitrogen, the protected urea is cheaper. Like, yeah. Siobhan, are you hearing anything on the availability of protected urea? Like, I mean, I know a lot of the tillage guys aren't using it, but in terms of just talking to the merchants now, have you heard anything late?
Yeah, sure. Look, urea is scarce. Like, if there's urea there, they'll dress it. But I suppose the urea in the first place is hard to get into the country, and I am hearing stocks low now and people not being able to get it. But that man is saying the merchant isn't going to get it. You know, if farmers put in their orders, the merchant will get it. The fear is for the merchant that they'll get it and they'll be left with it in stock. And protected urea doesn't last in the same way that other fertilizer products last. So if you put in your order with your merchant and they're sure that you're going to buy it, they'll most likely get it for you. So, you know, that plan ahead.
Joe from Cavan, I'm not sure if this is he's spreading fertilizer in the dark. What's the advice?
Good lights,
Adam,
Jack. Good lights on the tractor. That's what we do in Cavan, Jack. We work that hard during the day. We have to go with the fertilizer at night up this country.
Yeah. I'd say you're hiding from the fertilizer register. That's what you're hiding from. I'd say, like. Brian from Offaly, have you any results from the slurry test on Tullamore Farm? No, you don't have that. We'd have bulls in the shed now as well. So so you don't have results. I think we covered that. Like, but if it is a shed where there's bulls and lots of concentrate going in, like, I mean, you're going to get a lot more P in the slurry. Isn't that fair to say? Like, it's going to be a high phosphorus slurry.
Yeah, that's it. Think about what's in the animal's diet and target it at the indices.
Siobhan, while I have you, Richard and Carlo, where can I get my slurry tested? Is it expensive? We've covered off the expensive one. You said 60 to 80 euros a sample. Where can I get them tested? Is there many labs doing it?
Yeah, most labs that do your soil samples will do your slurry samples as well. So I probably shouldn't advertise labs. Like, people know where they'll get their soil samples done. So
most of them are doing it though. Like,
yeah,
it's grand. Okay, Colin from Leitrim, I applied for soil sampling program, but I haven't heard anything back. What's the story, or have you any update? Talk to me. Who's the expert on the soil? That's just the department soil sampling program, I presume.
Speaking to Darren today, Jack, I think there's about 7,000 applicants. There's about 1,600 samples so far up until the end of January. We understand that it's been ramped up a little bit in the last week or 10 days, but the chances are a lot of those farms aren't going to be sampled this spring, and they'll be held over to next, I suppose, autumn or winter time in terms of sampling. It's very disappointing, I suppose, for those farmers who applied, way back in November, December, I think it was, to get the samples done. But the chances are there won't be. Well, there'll be no use, I suppose, in another month, Jack, because there'll be slurry or fertilizer will have gone out on a lot of those farms.
Okay. Folks, I think we're going well. We're getting through a couple of the questions as they come in. Remember, WhatsApp 086 836 6465 or email webinar@farmersjournal.ie. I think we'll move on to our next video. It's Adam and Sean back in Tullamore Farm manager Sean Diver, talking about what's happening there in terms of fertilizer.
Okay, Sean, just to talk a little bit about what the plan is for spring 2022 on Tullamore Farm. I guess if we look back at last year, we're somewhere between 18 and 20,000 on a fertiliser bill here every year. It's a massive cost. It's going to be a huge, bigger cost in terms of 2022. That's going to be close to 35,000, 40,000. In terms of amending the strategy here in the spring, what have you looked at in terms of trying to maybe reduce that fertiliser bill?
Yeah, look, I suppose we're throughout the winter, number one is we've been trying to save as much fodder in the yard, that we bought in some hay in order to try and maybe leave as much silage in the pit, the way that maybe we could graze more ground and make less silage. That's an option on some farms. And look, we've been way more vigilant about how we use our slurry. And, there was a time when the open date would come and you'd want to get tanks emptied to make room in the yard. This year we've been saving it and trying to hold out as long as we possibly can. And now we've started to go out with some slurry onto grazing paddocks rather than maybe going straight to the silage ground. And I suppose, look, we're also trying to hold out and getting out with that urea, because we're very conscious of the fact that obviously it's up there at 900, nearly €1,000 a tonne, that we can't afford to lose any of that urea when it goes out. So we're really waiting until ground temperatures are exactly right, before we go out.
So we're here on it's Monday the 7th of February here. In terms of, have you gone out with any fertiliser to date as of yet?
No bag fertiliser has gone out. And if you had turned back the clock, and if we had weather like this last year, we probably would have had most of the farm covered at this stage. You know, it's not the fact that we would have been losing fertilizer maybe then either, but it's just that we want to be 100% sure that we're getting the maximum kick out of that.
So you're going to delay, I suppose, fertilizer for another maybe week or two before you're sure. I suppose soil temperature at the moment are hovering between sort of 5 and 6. You're going to wait then to be definitely 6 or above it before you go with that first application of fertilizer.
We'll want to see you know, ground temperatures being stable above 6. You know, they're talking about maybe temperatures getting back down at night this week, so I'm just going to wait to see how that pans out first and see what next week brings, and work off the soil temperatures then.
So in terms of splitting the farm up then in 3, we'll say you go your grazed out paddocks, your very bare paddocks, your medium covers and your heavy covers. Just tell me a little bit about what the plan is or what the strategy is for each of those different. I suppose if we divided the farm into very simple 3 different portions, what's the strategy for each of them?
Yeah, so grazed and cleaned out paddocks, you're probably looking at closing them up for silage, so we're going to go with around 3,000 gallon of slurry there if we can. And then those medium covers, we're gone out there today with the trail and shoe with some slurry on them, around 2,000 gallon to the acre. And then, you know, what doesn't get the slurry, we're going to go out with that bit of urea. Heavier covers, look, some of them will be grazed off before they'll get anything, and then maybe go out with a bit of slurry or urea. And some of the heavier covers in out farm, we probably will put a half bag urea on them.
In terms of turning out stock, what way are you looking? Like, we're still quite early, but what do you reckon, or what's priority in terms of turning out first stock now?
Yeah, so weaning heifers are going to have to go first anyways. They're in rented accommodation, so, you know, we want to cut the cost of the rent. So we're going to try and get them out, and they'll do a better thrive, and they're light on the ground as well. And again then, look, we've around 20 cows calved now, or just over 20 cows, and, you know, we're looking at space is going to get tight in the yard from, you know, the next couple of weeks on. So some of them stronger calves, after we get them dehorned and, you know, up to speed in vaccines, they can start moving out as well into nice sheltered good covers of grass like this.
The cover that we're on at the moment, there's a real good cover of grass here. In terms of, just tell me a little bit about the history of this paddock and when it was closed up and what the plan is with it.
Yeah, closed up around the 5th of October, one of the first paddocks on the farm to be closed up, for the simple reason that it's close to the yard and it's very well sheltered. You know, and that has paid in dividends. We've got a cover back here now of around 1,500 kilos of dry matter per hectare, and this is going to be a paddock now for young calves coming out because it's so close to the yard and it's nice and sheltered.
I guess the temptation was there last November in terms of seeing a cover of grass here, maybe of staying out with weanings a little bit longer, but you didn't do that.
Yeah, no, look, it's the worst thing you probably could do is go back in the paddocks you closed, and it's very tempting when you get around Christmas time and, you know, ewes are running around the farm, you're really tempted to let them in, but, you know, you can't do that if you want to have grass for spring.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Adam, Nico made a guest appearance there as well, which he picked a right nice paddock of grass. Like, have you many of them? Have you many paddocks like that?
Sean, he's very good, Jack, at sort of keeping those paddocks around the yard, because look, we'll be under pressure there. There's 30 odd cows calved in Tullamore. We'll be under pressure for creep areas. And in the past, we would have moved out to those paddocks around the yard. They're really, really useful in terms of those paddocks, especially that's a sort of a hill at the back of the sheds. Really, really sheltered, lots of tree cover around them, and they're brilliant for either ewes or lambs or cows or calves. So he tends to keep them around the yard pretty well.
And Adam, just for those that don't know, I mean, you don't start lambing until it's another month away, is it?
Yeah, probably 10th or 11th of March. You'll expect the first lambs there, Jack. We'll try and get the back broke on calving before lambing starts.
So, I mean, he talked about the 2 groups of stocks, the weanling heifers. How many weanling heifers have you? And will you kind of let them all out into the one bundle, or will you split them up to try and kind of manage the conditions, or what do you do?
Yeah, there's about 45 weanling heifers there. They'll probably be split maybe in 2 just to go out at the very start, just to try and ease up that group a wee bit. But we'll be looking for ground conditions, to be honest. The way ground was going, we thought maybe we'd be out this week with them, but the first 3 days of this week has really put the tin hat on it down there, and it'll be another week before we dry off again there. So we're going to be a little bit later than maybe other years in terms of getting out.
And Adam, any calf cows out? Like, 'cause I mean, that'll be the big pressure, cows and calves, like to try and get them out, keep the calves healthy, etc., and that kind of thing. Nothing out yet, I presume.
No, we're just sort of borderline. As I said, 30 odd cows calved there. We're okay as regards creep at the moment. Now, in the past, he has made up a temporary creep area and a set the passage of a shed that sort of leaves us that we can keep cows and calves in for another little while. But it's sort of borderline now in terms of you'd like to maybe getting out some cows and calves next week. But we have good sort of strong cows that we can go with that was calved at the very start of calving.
He talked about keeping the silage in the pit, like he bought a bit of extra hay. Did it work so far? Like, I mean, we're not in the middle of February yet. You might use it yet, but have you more silage in the yard?
Yeah, I suppose that hay was bought in at €20 a bale, Jack. We thought it was good value, and we thought we could feed that to some of the suckler cows in terms of, it'd be hard probably to make hay this year for €20 a bale if we counted in fertilizer and counted in contractor and everything. So we just thought that was a good strategy for us down there in terms of trying to leave over silage. And look, it'll all depend on the spring, I guess. We have 2 good chunks of silage there left, but if it's a late spring, I guess we'll end up using that. But hopefully we'll get keeping some of that for and maybe cut back a wee bit. This is the year, I suppose. Every year down there, we've ended up with a block of silage left off, and we've always said, well, will we go ahead and cut our complement of silage, or will we tailor it back that we end up using all our silage? We haven't done that. We've kept cutting every time, cutting the same and leaving up with a chunk. But maybe in a year like this, maybe you'll end up using that.
Mark, not to cast any aspersions on Adam or Sean and what they're doing down in Tullamore Farm, but here we are now, right? And we've had a great week in the first week of February. Weather conditions, ground conditions were perfect. The lads held the fertilizer in the bag. They have a huge demand for grass now. They have heifers and cows and calves wanting to get out. It's going to stay wet for the next 2 to 3 weeks. Was it the right thing to do not to go out with the bag on that farm where the demand was high, where soil fertility was good? The guys talked about temperature being 5-6 degrees, maybe not quite kind of good enough to get the big bang. What do you reckon? Could they be proven wrong?
Well, I think they have been so far, Jack. I think they are right. Like, the growth rates have been low. The demand for nitrogen has been low. They've been using slurry there. Yeah, look, things will only get better from here on in, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Weather-wise, the days will be getting longer. You'll have more sunshine, more energy to drive that growth in the grass plant to utilize that nitrogen. So look, I think it is the best. I think it is so far anyway. I've no crystal ball. I can't tell you what's
that pallet of stuff, lads, is €2,000 for a pallet. I couldn't take the chance and run with, in terms of, it's an awful lot of money in terms of, and whether it work. Other years you might say, well, maybe it didn't work, or maybe it did work, it got cold, and you never know whether you got a kick out of it or not. But geez, I couldn't take that chance down there this year. Those little pallets of fertilizer in the yard are 7,200. That's what that little batch of stuff is.
I'm well aware. But I mean, feed costs money as well, whether it's the silage or whether it's the concentrate that you're buying, and the quicker you get out. Did many guys on the dairy side take a chance last week, or did most of them hold off as well, a bit like Tullamore Farm?
Jack, they didn't take the chance last week. They took it about 3 weeks ago, and got the benefit of the good weather for the last couple of weeks. Now that's, they're the intensive guys that need the grass and have a track record, I suppose, of getting a good response in their farms to that early nitrogen. We talk about over a 2-month period growing about 10 kilos of grass for every 1 kilogram of nitrogen applied. They're kind of, that's studies have done to back that up. They're the intensive farms, Jack, that need to grow the feed, as you pointed out. Or otherwise there's going to be massive costs in terms of extra meal and extra silage. But again, I wouldn't do that now, because there's a potential for losses there at the moment because the weather is poor and ground is saturated. But we do need to remember that the weather was exceptionally good up to now.
Yes.
And I think that nitrogen that was applied has been used.
Yeah,
will be used over the next 6 weeks as well. It's not lost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Mark, urea is still the product of choice. Our friend from Mayo can't get the protected urea, but urea is still the product of choice in difficult weather conditions, I call it, where you're going to get spring weather, we'll say, in February and March. Urea is the product of choice as opposed to any other source of nitrogen.
Yeah, look at this time of the year it is, and a urea-based fertilizer is the safest, compared to a can-based or a nitrate-based. It will fix to the soil, so it most definitely is the product of choice as we speak.
Okay. Right, folks, listen, there's still some questions coming in. I think I'll hold them. We might watch the last video. Aidan, you're going to give us a lesson on the whiteboard. We'll watch the last video and I'll come back, and then we'll kind of have a wrap session in terms of the questions and answers that have come in, and tidy up any questions that have come in on the
One of the most confusing aspects of farming in Ireland is the way we talk about and communicate fertilizer settings, spreading rates, all that kind of stuff. So over the next few minutes, I hope to make that a little bit clearer for everyone, including myself. one of the first things you need is a calculator. You know, if you're very good at maths, you can probably multiply all these out in your head. But for me, I need a calculator to do it. Look, your phone calculator will do fine. The first thing is just to get a handle on the difference between units per acre and kilograms per hectare, because different advice is given in different ways. To convert units per acre to kilograms per hectare, multiply by 1.25. To get kilos per hectare into units per acre, multiply by 0.8. That's the first thing. Now, I have a couple of examples of typical spreading rates, but really the settings can be, you know, the rate can be anything. It's the process to convert it to the correct setting is what you want. And I suppose the reason we do this is because fertilizer spreaders themselves are all set up in terms of kilograms per hectare of actual product. Now that's most spreaders. Most of the modern spreaders are all kilograms per hectare of product, not necessarily kilograms per hectare of nitrogen or phosphorus or potash. It's the product, so it's the total quantity of the fertilizer is what they spread on a per hectare basis. So that's our end goal when we want to decide what the settings are, and it can get quite confusing. But the first example is if you want to spread 30 units per acre of can. The first thing I do in this instance, and I'm sure there's different ways around it, but this is what I do, is I multiply the 30 by 1.25, and that gives us 38 kgs of nitrogen per hectare. Now that's actual nitrogen, that's not product. So then we want to get that to product, and we know that can I should say, is 27% nitrogen. So of all what's in the bag, 27% of that is actually nitrogen. So if we divide the 38, which is the kilograms of nitrogen per hectare, by 0.27, which is coming from the percentage of nitrogen in the product, that comes up then with 140 kilograms per hectare of actual product. So that's one example. The next one then is looking at urea, which is 46% nitrogen typically. So we divide, so this is already in kilograms of N per hectare. So we divide that then by the percentage of nitrogen, which is 46%, to get the kilograms of product per hectare. So in this case, it's 30 kilograms divided by 0.46 equals 65 kilograms of actual urea per hectare. Now, my next example is looking at bags, because this is another way of that farmers use to give fertilizer advice. So 2 bags per acre of 18612 is the equivalent of saying 2 by 50 kilograms bags, which is 100 kilograms per acre. Multiply that then by 2.47 to convert acres to hectares, and that gives you 247 kilograms of actual product per hectare. And this is the same as saying, 44 kilograms of N per hectare, and I get that because I multiply 247 by 18%, which is 44. It's 15 kilograms of P per hectare, and it's 30 kilograms of K per hectare. But on the fertilizer spreader, if you want to spread 2 bags per acre of 18612, you get your setting on the at the 247 kilograms of product per hectare rate. So to go back a step in terms of spreading, so this is critically important. We know now what the rate is, but we need to set up the fertilizer spreader to spread that amount. And I suppose the first steps you do is you go to the spreader chart. And that's either a chart on the side of the spreader itself. It can be a manual that comes with the fertilizer spreader when you buy it. Or a lot of these modern spreaders, they've actually got an app on your phone for giving you the rates when you put in the different product that you want to spread. So you select this product of all, there's hundreds of different products available and from different manufacturers. You set for your spreading width, if you're spreading 8, 12, 16, 24 meters, whatever your desired width is, and the speed you want to travel at. So it's usually between 8 and 12 kilometers per hour. And within that, when you know that information, then you can then work across on the chart based on the rate that you want to spread. So that's what we decided a few moments ago, the kilogram per hectare of product. Now it's product, not actually a nutrient per hectare. So that's how you set up the fertilizer spreader in that case. It's like everything, it's important to do a few cross checks to make sure that you're going to be accurate. These are some little tips, like so. One, most people understand this already, but one 500 kilogram bag of a big bag of fertilizer contains 10 small bags. So if you're told or decided to spread a bag per acre of can, let's say, and you're using a big bag, that should cover 10 acres. Now, urea is slightly different because the density of urea is less. So those big bags of urea weigh 375 kilograms. So that contains 7.5 small bags of urea. So if you want to spread a bag or half a bag per acre of urea, one big bag should cover 15 acres. 2 bags will cover 30 acres. It's important to recognise as well that all fertilizer is different, you know, from batch to batch, even if it's the same product, the same specification from the same company. Each one will be different because they all have different densities and dry matters within it based on the environment that they're in. So it's important to calibrate regularly to make sure that the spreader is, or the product is going out to the spreader at the same rate, because particularly the likes of urea will have different, will soak up moisture very easily. So the speed of the urea coming out of the chute will be different. The same with all fertilizer. It's important as well, obviously, to keep in mind buffer strips. So for the likes of fertilizer, it's 2 meters of a buffer strip that you can't apply fertilizer in between each watercourse, no matter how big or small the watercourse is. For slurry and other products, that varies from time to time and based on what the watercourse is. But for fertilizer, it's 2 meters, and it's important to adhere to that because otherwise you're wasting fertilizer. It's going into the watercourse, it's polluting the rivers and streams, and it's a waste of money. So it doesn't make sense. So that's basically a rundown of how I would calibrate a fertilizer spreader.
We've lost Jack, Adam, have we?
I think he might be. He might
just sorry, folks. Small technical problem there. Dudley took the power out, but we got it back up and going just in time. Right. So, Aidan, I mean, look, there's a couple of questions are related to that whole piece in terms of kind of I suppose spreading and you know, calibration, etc., and that kind of thing. Someone here. Aidan, my fertilizer spreader, sorry, James and Meath. Aidan, my fertilizer spreader manual doesn't give settings for low application rates. What can I do?
Yeah, Jack, this is a really common one. You know, a lot of the manuals that I've mentioned them in the video we've seen, like they have settings for all sorts of stuff, but they generally don't go down low enough to what we're spreading at. A lot of these are based on tillage crops, I suppose, that are getting, you know, maybe 1 or 2 applications in the year, and they're spreading a couple of bags per acre. So if we want to spread half a bag per acre or a quarter of a bag per acre of protected urea, which is common now, you know, with spreading 15, 16 units, we even have those spreading 9 units of urea per acre for those, you know, high clover fields during the summer. So like that's not on the manual. So what I do in this instance, whether I'm right or wrong, maybe Mark has something to add in this, but I just look at the increments on the manual. So there's a big spreading chart. There'll be an increment for each rate, and I just add on what the increment is for the last lowest setting, if that makes sense. So if it usually drops by, you know, 10 kilograms per hectare, I just or 10 of a setting, I'll just change that back to setting, and then I just do a few cross checks afterwards to make sure that I'm fairly right.
Mark, anything to add on that?
Oh, I think that's good, Aidan. Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Okay, lots of questions, guys. So I think I'm going to we were here for the guts of an hour, so I think we will just move it along in terms of trying to get through some of the questions that have come in on the WhatsApp 08683666465. So, Mark, Patricia and Donegal, I'm stocked at a cow to the hectare in a suckler wheeling system. What's the least I can get away with, and when should I go? I presume we're talking nitrogen here. Like, so Patricia Donegal, I'm stocked at the cow to the hectare in a suckler weaning system. What's the least nitrogen I'm going to say I can get away with, and when should I go?
Well, you're stocked low in terms of nitrogen. Like in terms of we're probably what 60, 70 units per acre. I don't know, Adam, do you have anything to throw in?
Yeah, I suppose if I know those lower stock farms, maybe even lower, mark. I don't know. I'd be talking maybe 40 or 50, maybe in terms of even maybe up until that 15th of April mark, and maybe after that, you probably look at. I think maybe we're over egging the thing maybe on dry stock farms a little bit in terms of what we could get away with as regards what grass we're growing. Like we're probably down to 5 or 6 ton of dry matter to the hectare on a lot of those farms, and possibly even on the semi-intensive farms, maybe we're taking out paddocks to try and maintain grass quality and stuff, and maybe we might get away with a little bit less in 2022.
Adam, this is related to that. John in Galway, interesting lads. Can you outline how slurry can be best used to grow the most economical crop of traditional hay meadow? So he's a lowly stock person or farmer will say, you're looking for a hay crop. Can you state how much to spread, when to spread, and what fertilizer to top up with?
Yeah, Jack, I suppose this is maybe one area where we could really get better on dry stock farms as regards in the West, because in the past and in other years we would have, we'll say, went out with slurry during the summer months. When ground gets dry, that's the easy thing to do up here. When we say after the silage crop, after first cut silage, after second cut silage, go out with the slurry, and it takes a little bit more hassle and it takes a little bit more management, a little bit more thinking to get out with slurry now. And I think we could get out with slurry now, and we could reduce our fertilizer requirement. And for those hay meadows, if we got out with slurry now on those, that's the P&K requirement. And they might take very little nitrogen after that. Maybe in terms of maybe half a bag of urea, bag of can, whatever it is, and you could have enough nitrogen out on that for a hay meadow later on.
Okay, WhatsApp, multi-species. So Siobhan or Aidan or Mark, any multi-species swards, what grass variety are you including? Will red clover and white clover not have too high of a nitrogen content? So 2 questions. Multi-species swards, what grass variety are you including? Will the red clover and white clover not have too high of a nitrogen content? Who wants to take it?
Most of the mixes that have they'd have a few different perennial ryegrasses in it. So like perennial ryegrass is fine in it. You can make up your own mix, or you can take a standard mix from one of the suppliers. On the clover, like the max is 40% on clover inclusion rate. Like if you go over 40%, you're at risk of leaching from the sward. Like clover is producing nitrogen, so you still have a lot of nitrogen in the soil. Maybe Aidan wants to add something.
Yeah. No, I'd say go with a good grass variety, because it's still making a lot of the. It's a high sward composition would be ryegrass, and it's going to be there after the the other, like the chicories and the herbs maybe die out over time. So it's important to pick a good one. Some people also use the likes of Timothy, because it has early spring growth.
Okay, so you're saying go with a good PPI grass variety. Go with a good high yielding perennial ryegrass. Okay. What's the max cover? I got marked on this one. It's a lime one. What is the max cover you can spread lime on? You're saying it's maybe a little bit late, but what is the max cover, grass cover? 5-6 inches of grass. What is the max cover you can spread lime on?
You're probably talking 500-600, I'd imagine, Jack. Like, you know what I mean? As low as possible. Like, you know what I mean? Ideally, after paddocks are grazed out, it's a great time to get in with lime. Like,
I'd say with you, Mark, for this one. Is there any merit to the slurry additives?
The slurry additives, again, they're questionable. There has been work done in Johnstown where they looked at 4 additives, and from an emissions point of view, they couldn't find any real benefit. There was one there, reduced methane by 10%, but I suppose the jury is still out on the slurry additives. Like.
Okay, Adam, back to you. Is it more economical to reduce stocking rate on the sucker side and purchase fertilizer? So don't mind you were standing beside the bag, leave the bag there, or don't bring the bag around the yard. Like, reduce your stocking rate and forget about the fertilizer.
Yeah, if you were in Elfin today, Jack, and seen 600 kilo bullocks hit 2,000 a head, you'd definitely say, head to the ring with them and forget about the fertilizer for 2022. But I suppose maybe there's some of that in terms of maybe non-priority stock, or if you had cows maybe that you're thinking of culling anyway, maybe to offload them before you go to grass. I wouldn't be offloading breeding stock. You're trying to keep them, but definitely, yeah. At the moment, the cattle trade is very, very hot, and you could use it as an opportunity maybe to offload a little as regards lowering your stocking rate for grass.
Okay, nice one, Aidan. John in Cork, I applied slurry using the dribble bar at the end of January, the 29th of January, at 2,300 gallons an acre. Field is greening up and has grown compared to the fields that have not got slurry. Should I apply more slurry or fertilizer in March, as it is for first cut silage in May? So we got 2,300 gallons to the acre. That's all I can see on with a dribble bar.
But is he going to? I suppose is he going to graze it? Is a question. And if he is, there'll be some off takes off that. but there probably isn't enough. Mark, help me here. Is there enough P's and K's out at 2,500 gallons per acre?
You're sort of borderline there. Like you'd want 2,500, 3,000 gallons. I'd be asking the question: is it index 1 or 2 or 3?
Yeah.
Like if it was index 3, I'd say all you want is straight nitrogen. If it was index 1 or 2, I'd be inclined to top it up with something like 27s, maybe bring it up to maybe 80 units of nitrogen. 2.5, maybe 3 bags of 27s possibly. Just to get that little bit of fresh P in.
Yeah. Depends. As we said, we don't know. We don't have enough information in terms of the index. Okay. Next question. I'm jumping between topics here, but I just want to get the questions answered off as best we can. We'll say, should we be more proactive in back fencing and giving daily areas and longer recovery times? And just this grazing management question: should we be more proactive in back fencing and giving daily areas and to help the kind of recovery, I suppose?
Oh, definitely. That's a given, Jack. Yeah, I mean, you need to treat them, 12-hour breaks if it's dairy cows, probably get away to 24-hour breaks if it's beef cattle. And back fence is critical. Like, you don't want those animals walking back over those graze yesterday. That's where the real damage is going to take place.
I'll stay with you, Aidan. Philip Tyndall down in Wexford. I spread slurry on any available lower covers on milking platform on the day the slurry opened. I'm taking it. There is up to 300 kilos dry matter, more grass on those paddocks at the moment. I probably should have spread more, but he obviously had heavy covers of grass on a lot of the farm. Like, I mean, more of a comment. I don't see a question, but I mean, yeah, the slurry, he's getting a good response. He's saying to it, the slurry that went out, and he kind of said he's saying to himself now, here we are in the middle of February, that I should have gone with more maybe rather than holding off. There was a talk of holding off on slurry to keep it closer to the temperature.
Yeah, it's common, but you have to go. Probably mix is probably essential, Jack. Go a bit early and go a bit late as well. We're going to get a better response.
Yeah. Siobhan, one for you. Best time to apply farmyard manure and what areas of the farm? So I suppose just give us a feel for the nutrient value of farmyard manure, and I suppose where best to apply it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be applying it in the autumn time, like going out with the grazing season, and as well it's broken down at that time of year as well. So you want to be applying. You don't want to be putting out bulks of straw on the ground. It's good for P&K, but look, it's very slow release. Like, farmyard manure is great for building up your soil organic matter, but you're not going to, I wouldn't be going reducing my P&K rates as a result of applying it in 1 year. So yeah.
Okay, no, nice one. Tim and Kerry, Aidan, we'll pretend it's a dairy farm. I don't know. Could I go with pig slurry after grazing as opposed to chemical nitrogen?
He could, yeah. Tim could, yeah. No problem there. Now, I want to be careful with if there's high potash levels in the pig slurry. It could cause grass tetany issues if there's a lot of potash going out afterwards. You want to be very low index fields, I say, that you'd be targeting with the pig slurry.
And pig slurry is very variable. Like, I mean, what shed are you getting out of it? Make sure you kind of have some idea what's in it. Like, there's a lot of power washings in it and stuff as well.
Is there is there a big variation now? Nevertheless, would the phosphorus not be high in it all, Siobhan, given that they're all on concentrate, no matter what, whether it's the farrowing shed or the finishing shed or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah, the few results we got back, phosphorus is generally high, but then huge variations within them. So, like, are they 6 or are they 13? So, and nitrogen was low in some of them as well, lower than I would have expected. So, if you can test it or have some sort of an idea.
It even depends on the feeding system as well. Are the feeding, is a wet or a dry feeding system?
Or dry.
The dry feeding systems tend to have good quality slurry, high dry matters,
Okay, Mark, you touched off at this earlier. I spread urea on silage ground before and got bad results. Any ideas? You'd hear that, in discussion groups and whatever around a lot. Like, I mean, you touched off it earlier in terms of spread urea not getting the results that maybe expected.
Yeah, I suppose it's down to conditions, Jack. And even if you could split it, even go on maybe 2 applications rather than a single application, you will reduce the risk of losses.
Okay. Okay, not so bad. We're doing well. Mark, maybe just to finish off on you, and in terms of protected urea, I suppose the yield response of protected urea, there's some science to suggest that there is 10 or 12% more grass, we'll say, using protected urea. I mean, am I right there in terms of that? And just kind of maybe fill us in terms of some of the kind of studies behind that.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing to be mindful of is that you're reducing the loss of nitrogen with protected urea, like you're reducing the losses compared to ordinary urea. And there's work from Johnstown there. There's 6 out of 7 years they're growing 13% more grass in a simulated grazing situation. Like, do you know what I mean? And that's over ordinary urea. So in effect, you can spread less protected urea compared to ordinary urea, about 10% less nitrogen using protected urea, and grow 13% more grass.
Mark, is there any benefit in spring for that? You know, because a lot of lads will use just the ordinary urea now, we say, rather to protect it.
There is Aidan, like using the protected urea at this time of year, there is benefits because for the work that was done in Johnstown, we actually got the highest losses in March through volatilization, like if you get those drying conditions. So most definitely there is a benefit to using protected urea at this time.
Okay.
There is another video that's available with the machinery guys, with Peter Keaveney, in terms of setting up the fertilizer spreader. So if anyone is interested in watching that short video, we'll get it up and we'll put it in, we'll tag it along with this session. We won't watch it now tonight, but I mean, if anyone is keen to see that video, we'll have it available in terms of setting up the spreader for the fertilizer, because I know a lot of guys are beginning to kind of think that way at the moment. Look, we've had a very good night. I mean, it's heading for 9:45, and I think we've had some great questions from the audience and good interaction in terms of the panel, in fairness, around various different topics that we've moved through. We've covered a lot from I suppose ground conditions starting off in terms of Adam and the slurry tank, right through to slurry testing, lime, soil sampling, and gone through all the different systems in terms of the livestock sectors. We've gone through the dairy and the beef and cattle sector. So look, at folks, I think thanks a million for your input. I think it's been very worthwhile, and it's very timely now at this time of the year, I suppose, to get these questions out, because you know these are the farmers are asking the questions now, and I hopefully we've been able to answer some of them, and indeed thanks to Mark, our specialist from Teagasc, for sitting in with us. What else is there to say to finish up? Okay, the next webinar is the 23rd of February, and Adam, that's again on the beef trade, and it's a kind of, the question is at that stage is in terms of finishing in the shed, depending on beef price, or storing them or letting them out to grass, we'll say. So that's the 23rd of February. That's the next webinar in terms of that's next week, Adam, in terms of the next webinar. Thanks to Chanel Pharma and to AXA Insurance, our partners, for this week in terms of the webinars. I think that's it. Thanks once again to everyone for participating. Thanks to all our audience for getting the questions in, and thanks to the guys for answering them as best we can. Until then, we'll be back again next week, so stay safe and safe farming.